So, hello everyone. Good morning, slash afternoon, slash evening, slash night, depending on where you are. My name is Mairead, and I am in Galway in the west of Ireland. And it is freezing. Winter has well and truly landed. So I hope you're not as cold wherever you are. So today, everyone, we have a lovely topic. It's all about motivating quiet students to speak. I've been teaching for nearly 20 years now, all over the world, students of all nationalities. And let me tell you that quiet students are definitely a feature of certainly every classroom that I've ever taught, or every class that I've ever taught. All right, so hopefully you are going to get lots of useful tips today on how to deal with these quiet students. All right, let's go. Okay, so one really important thing to take into account is to think about our students as individuals, okay, not just as a homogenous class. Within every class, there will be, many different personality types. And once we're prepared for this, we're better able to deal with it, I think. So when considering your students, bear in mind that all students have different strengths and weaknesses. Okay, there will be no two students alike in terms of what they can do really well and what they need more help with. Okay, so very often a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work because one size simply does not fit all. Okay, all of our students are different. Some students may be a lot more nervous about speaking aloud in class. Some students might be more comfortable with writing or with reading, okay, where, they're not on display as much. Whereas, speaking aloud in front of a group can terrify them. Just as I'm sure with a lot of people out there, right? Public speaking can always be nerve-wracking. So yeah, bear in mind, some students might be genuinely very, very nervous at the thought of speaking aloud. I also find that some students are afraid to speak out loud because they don't want to make a mistake, okay? They don't want to lose face in front of you or in front of their classmates, okay? So you will often encounter the student who won't speak unless they are sure that they're about to say something accurate and something correct, okay? So, when a student is reluctant to speak in class, consider the possibilities why. Okay, you could even ask them, after class, or if there's if you can get them for a moment during class while the rest of the students are busy, don't be afraid to ask them. I noticed that you're not speaking very much in class. Why is that? Okay, because knowledge is power. If we know the reason, we'll be better able to help. As for ourselves as teachers, there are a couple of things we can do to try and create an atmosphere that's conducive to speaking up. We should always try to be positive and encouraging. Okay, we want to leave all negativity at the door. Okay, we want to acknowledge and praise contributions, whether the student is correct or not. It doesn't matter. We always try to acknowledge the effort. Okay. If we ask a student a question and they don't know the answer, we should always try to move on pretty quickly. Okay. Try not to dwell too much on a student who obviously doesn't know the answer. We can give them a prompt for sure. Maybe give them one clue or one prompt. But if they don't know, move on, okay? Again, acknowledge the effort, okay? And ask somebody else, okay? Don't keep them under the spotlight too long. Another thing we can do to encourage students to speak more in class is to use different techniques when asking questions. We could go with the classic, okay, hands up, who wants to answer this question? That way we know that if someone puts their hand up, they're willing to speak, okay? We can also use some open questions where we throw the question out there to the class, okay? We just say, so anybody, yeah, who wants to answer this question? Okay, again, we're giving the shy students the chance to answer if they feel confident or not, okay? We're not pressuring anyone. Another nice option is to nominate. Now, we can, say by name who we want to answer the question. If we know, for example, that John has a great answer to a question, we can say, so John, why don't you tell us the answer to whatever, okay? If we don't want to nominate by name, what I like to do is break the class into sections. So I might say, okay, somebody sitting on the right-hand side, yeah, answer the question. Or can somebody sitting on the left side of the classroom give me an answer? Okay, what about the people at the back of the classroom? So again, you're narrowing down the group of people who you want to give the answer, but you're not necessarily calling anyone out by name. So if we can use, oh, I'm sorry, my nose is dripping. I told you it was cold. So if we can use a variety of techniques, to ask students to answer our questions, chances are that students will eventually gain the confidence to try to answer. Most of all, we want to avoid putting pressure on students and potentially, terrifying the shy ones by constantly hounding them for answers. All right. Another golden rule, guys, is to give students time. I find that a lot of newer teachers in particular are terrified of silence, okay? They think silence is the enemy. So they might ask a student a question, and if that student doesn't answer within 2 seconds, the teacher kind of panics a little and says, oh, okay, no, it's okay. Mary, what do you think? Okay, they don't give enough processing time to the students. Okay. If you think about your students in an English as a foreign language classroom, when you ask a question in English, your student is going through many mental processes. First of all, they're trying to understand the question. Then they're probably translating the question into their own language. Then they're probably thinking of the answer in their own language. Then they have to translate the answer into English, okay, and then say it. So if you think about it, it's an incredible amount of processing that's going on very quickly. So we can help our students out a lot by just, asking our question, standing back and giving them time to answer. Okay. It could be 5 seconds, it could be 10. As long as we feel that the student is just processing, give them the time they need. All right. Please do not be afraid of silence. Okay, silence is our friend in the classroom. Processing time is so, so important. All right. So as we said then, give your students time to think about their response. If you ask, for example, what are your plans for the weekend? Tell students you have 30 seconds to think, and then we will share some ideas. Okay. So like you're building in that processing time into the task. Okay. You might have some students who start to speak immediately, so you can just tell them, wait a moment, just think for 30 seconds. Okay. That can be really effective. Yeah, just building in that processing time. Okay. Another way we can give students time is to perhaps give them a task to do, give them a speaking task, okay? And then while the students are, getting started and, talking with a partner maybe, or talking with a group, you can start monitoring, okay? That is walking around the classroom, listening into groups as they speak, okay? Constantly on the move. That way you can check in with all the groups and especially with the weaker students, okay? Now, we don't want to monitor and be right in their faces, okay? We want to, stand back. We don't want to crowd them. We don't want them to feel like we're hanging on their every word. But at the same time, we want to be within earshot. And if we hear that any of the students are having difficulties, then we can step in if we think it's necessary. We can maybe prompt them. We can maybe give them an encouraging nod and a smile. Our aim is to be present without necessarily intruding. Just keep on moving around the class, okay? And a lot of times you'll be able to detect any issues that weaker or quieter students might have, okay? Another really good advantage to this is that you can then, in feedback, avoid asking students who don't have the answer to a question. Okay, so if you were monitoring, for example, and you noticed that Suzanne, let's invent some names, you noticed that Suzanne did not have a comprehensive answer to one of the questions, make a mental note and do not ask Suzanne for the answer to that question. Okay, try to ask a student who has an answer. Okay, again, that helps us to avoid putting the quieter or perhaps the weaker students on the spot. All right, so always monitor carefully, have an idea what's going on with all the students while they're speaking. Okay, there are certain things that we can do as teachers to encourage these quieter students to speak. It's important that you think about what you say. For example, we could say, now we will share some ideas from our discussion. Okay, that's better than saying everybody will share their ideas. Okay, if we start off by saying everyone will share ideas, it kind of freaks out the quieter students. All right. Because they're just sitting there, they're like, I know she's going to ask me, and the tension builds and builds. Okay, so by by removing that idea of everybody will answer a question, hopefully we can take the tension out of the situation. So things like we'll share some ideas, let's share some ideas. So everybody, well, no, not everybody, we don't want to say that, but you can feel free to tell me your answers. If you want, share your ideas. Okay. The idea is that we're not, putting pressure on individuals that they have to speak. And this removes the stress for the students of being made to speak. That's all we ever try to do, is try to remove the stress and the pressure. It also means that you don't have to deal with someone refusing or unable to answer. Okay. Again, we don't want to be in that position where we ask somebody who doesn't know, or we ask someone who refuses to speak. Okay. That's just awkward for everybody. All right. When it comes to speaking tasks in particular, it's really important that we demonstrate the tasks. Okay. Sometimes if our students don't want to speak, maybe it's not that they're shy or It's not that they're a weaker level. It could simply mean that it could simply be that they just don't know what they have to do. Okay, they don't know what to talk about. They haven't understood the instructions. So if we're going to do a speaking task, always try to demonstrate yourself, or maybe pick a more outgoing student to demonstrate it with you, if it's a discussion or a role play. So if we demonstrate, our students will better understand when we show them what to do rather than just tell them. Okay, so yeah, do an example as a whole class. Ask your instruction checking questions. Make sure everybody is 100% clear on what to do before you let them off to do their speaking. Okay. Another golden motto, I think, of every teacher should be that mistakes are fine. Okay, mistakes are acceptable. They are welcome. They are a 100% necessary part of learning. So we've got to try to make mistakes an acceptable part of our classroom. People learn most from mistakes, I find. I know when I was learning Spanish and French, I learned so quickly from making mistakes and being corrected, but being corrected nicely. Maybe I said something in Spanish and my lovely Spanish friend, acknowledged what I said and, accepted my point, and then maybe repeated the sentence to me correctly. Okay, so, they did it nice and gently, and that really helped it solidify in my mind. I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel embarrassed about making the mistake. So I would say in the classroom, as the teacher, admit to your mistakes, own your mistakes. I know when I started teaching way back in the day, I think 18 or 19 years ago at this stage, I made mistakes all the time. Maybe I was writing a lot of information up on the board, okay, and maybe I misspelt a word, or maybe I left a word out. When I started teaching, I tried to gloss over it and hope that nobody noticed, because I would think that it was a sign of weakness to say, oh, look, I made a mistake. But as the years went on, as I gained more confidence in the classroom, I was more than willing to say, oh, silly me. Tell me, students, can you see my mistake on the board? Okay, I've made a mistake. See if you can find it. So, that will give the students the idea that everybody makes mistakes. Okay, there's nothing wrong with it. Just own it, correct it, and move on. All right. I think if the students see that the teacher is happy to acknowledge their own mistakes, it's then easier for the students to acknowledge their mistakes. Okay, it's not a big deal. Okay. Another way that we can encourage quiet students to speak is to try and incorporate as many different interaction patterns as we can. Okay. We should hopefully be doing lots of pair and group work, because this is where we can really maximize student talk time. If we're doing whole class discussions the whole time, only one person at a time is speaking. Yeah. If there are 15 students in a class, one person is speaking, 14 are sitting in silence. Okay. So while of course we like to do whole class discussions sometimes, or whole class feedback, really the majority of the tasks should be done in pairs or groups. That means that everybody is speaking all of the time. It's also a lot nicer for the quieter, shy students, because, if everybody is talking at the same time, they don't feel like everybody is listening to them. Okay. It's just their partner listening to them, not the whole class. In a pair or group work speaking task, there is this hum of conversation. It can sometimes get a bit loud. But, that's really nice for the quieter students because they don't feel like the spotlight is on them. So they're much more likely to be forthcoming. Okay. The beauty of pair and group work is that we can mix up the pairs and groups at regular intervals to give students the opportunity to work with different people. So a lot of times, for example, I will say, okay, everybody turn to the person on your right and discuss this question. Okay. Then if after a few minutes I feel like the task is fizzling out a little, or students are getting towards the end of their ideas, I'll say, okay, now everybody turn to the person on your left and answer the question again. This can be a great technique for consolidation, because if a student answers the same question twice, the second time, hopefully, they'll be able to put together a stronger piece of speaking because they've almost rehearsed it the first time they did it. Okay. Or if your students are working in groups of 3, for example, don't be afraid to call a halt if you notice that things are fizzling out, and mix up the groups again. Okay, reorder so that students are sitting with new people, and then ask them to do the task again. Okay. If you feel like you don't want them to do the same question again, just feed in another question. Okay, that's not a problem either. But it's nice to mix up the pairs, mix up the groups. Don't let them get used to speaking to just the same people all the time. Over time, this will really boost students' confidence when it comes to speaking. Okay. Now, when it comes to forming pairs or forming groups, you may be asking yourself, okay, but who do I put together? Do I just stick to, people who are sitting beside each other? Do I, move people around the room? You may be asking, how do you know who to put together? Well, I would say that it can be really useful to match strong and weak. Now, not even weak. Well, it could be weak, but also, it could be shy or quiet. Of course, weak doesn't necessarily equal shy. You could have an incredibly strong student who's shy. So here, I guess it should say strong and shy students. But if you notice that the strong student is dominating the quieter student, don't hesitate to mix things up again. Okay. There is the idea that an outgoing student and a quiet student should balance each other out, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes the outgoing one just steamrolls conversation. So this is definitely something to watch out for. Keep an eye on those classroom dynamics. And if you feel that there's a quieter student being steamrolled, get them out of there. Pair them with someone else. Okay. In fact, I find that 2 quieter students paired together can be far more effective than a quieter and an outgoing one together. Because, they're giving each other the time and space, and eventually, they will start speaking. And then the more outgoing students we can put together so that they can just fight it out. Okay, they can just, hold the conversation, not a bother to them. So yeah, when you're making your pairs then, make your best judgment of who to put together, but at the same time, keep a super close eye on the dynamics and don't be afraid to mix things up if it's not working. If you have a group who know each other pretty well and who you know pretty well, you can just leave it up to the students too. You can say, okay, everybody find a partner. You can talk to anybody in the whole room. Okay, go find your partner and give them a minute to work it out. If you choose this method of forming pairs and groups, again, just keep a really close eye on the dynamics and just make sure that there's nobody being left out or, nobody who isn't being approached. And that way you can just step in and avoid the awkwardness by saying, okay, Maria, why don't you join this group? All right. Or you could say, so Suzanne, why don't you ask Maria to join you? All right. I don't know why I'm going with girls' names as my examples. It's just, yeah, the first names that come to mind. So yeah, don't be afraid to mix things up if you find that a pair or a group is not working. All right, keep an eye on them and just be prepared to step in if necessary. All right, so let's look then at another essential piece of work of every teacher. That is scaffolding. Now, I'm sure you've come across this term, scaffolding. You've been working through the course. Okay, it's a term we use all the time. Basically, scaffolding means building a support structure. Okay, giving our students everything they need in order to do the task. Whether that's, giving effective instructions and asking instruction check questions, whether it's allowing them processing time, whether it's giving them prompts and suggestions, whether it's, doing examples yourself before the task starts. Okay, scaffolding is just basically giving students everything they need in order to be successful in a task. So one of the ways we can scaffold a speaking task really successfully is if we want our students to discuss or debate something, build up to it gradually. Okay, the idea is that we want to increase the level of challenge slowly. We want to carry everybody with us. So if my aim is to have a debate, say with half the class and half the class, I will first start with pair work. Okay, I'll give students the topic of the debate and ask them to discuss it in pairs. Okay, once they've discussed the topic in pairs, maybe advantages and disadvantages, I'll put two pairs together to form a group of 4, and they will hear each other's ideas, expand on those ideas, maybe agree or disagree with each other, etc. Once they've discussed their ideas in groups of 4, I might go half the class. Okay, so that they're doing the same thing, they're giving their pros and cons, they're explaining and justifying their opinions, but with a larger group. Okay, and then finally, when you've done your half and half, then we can merge everybody and have our whole class discussion. Okay, or if it's a debate, we can organize our students into pro the motion and against the motion, and then have our debate. Okay, so you see, we haven't just thrown our students into a massive discussion in front of everybody. We've built it up very gradually. I'm a huge fan of this. We call it pyramiding. Okay, that you're starting in a small group, getting larger and larger, and eventually it's the whole class. Because, by the time you get to the whole class scenario, students have talked about their ideas, 2-3 times? So they're comfortable now expressing those ideas in front of everybody. Okay, so yeah, always try to, increase the level of challenge gradually. And that will hopefully ensure that your students will be more comfortable speaking in front of the class. Okay. Now, another pretty necessary part, I think, of any language learning class is making a presentation. A lot of times we'll have to do end of course assessments or end of semester assessments. And, a speaking presentation can be part of this assessment. So as you can imagine, presentations can be a shy student's nightmare, okay, because they know that they have to get up and speak in front of everybody. Okay, it can really, really freak them out. Okay, it can be super nerve-wracking. So obviously, if there's a way your student can do, or if there's a way your quiet student can do a presentation, just to you or just in front of a small number of students, absolutely try to facilitate that. Okay. But if there's no way around it, if your student has to present in front of the whole class, what you can do is think about the order you want students to present in. Okay. Give the students an option if you can. Ask for volunteers, like who wants to go first, who wants to go second, etc. Sometimes, giving them that level of choice can settle them down a bit, because they know that they have chosen their own destiny in a way. Bear in mind, though, that it is not always best to leave nervous students till last. Okay. A lot of times, if you leave that nervous student until the end, they will have worked themselves up into a bit of a state. Okay, they'll have heard all of their classmates, and they'll have had time to get in their heads and convince themselves that they're going to mess it up, or that their work isn't as good as everybody else's. You all know those crazy destructive voices we hear in our own heads sometimes. So bear in mind that it can be better to encourage the more nervous, quiet students to actually go first rather than last. Okay. Because, then they don't have as much time to dwell on the nerves. And, once they're finished, they can just sit back and just, enjoy the rest of the class, having done their bit. Okay. There is so much psychology involved in teaching, as I'm sure you are all aware from your time as students. There's just so much going on in our students' heads. And we've got to try to be aware of this and try to mitigate or preempt a lot of issues. Okay. And just one more word on presentations, actually. It can be tempting to just tell our students, okay, give a presentation, on your home country. Okay. But, don't assume that our students know how to give a presentation. Presentations are tricky, even for people who are giving them in their first language. So do spend time, scaffolding the structure of a presentation. Talk about how to introduce a topic, talk about how to give examples, talk about how to justify them, show your students how to conclude. Okay. Again, by doing this, by giving them a structure to follow, it can take away a lot of the nerves related to presentations, or indeed any speaking class. All right. Okay. So just to sum up then, everything we've said about motivating quiet students to speak. I would just urge you as teachers to be thoughtful and to be considerate. Okay. Try to account for the different personality types, and try to, to scaffold, to encourage the quieter students to take part. Okay. Without pressuring them. Respect your students' concerns. No student will ever be encouraged to speak by being pressured, okay, or by being badgered for answers. Remember, as teachers, it is our job to facilitate learning, okay, to create the atmosphere conducive to learning. We do that by encouraging, supporting, and generally being as positive as we can. Okay, accepting all contributions, acknowledging effort at all times. Okay, and generally being a supportive presence in the classroom. All right. So everyone, that is it from me for the moment. Now I'm going to turn the floor over to you all. Okay. Any questions you have, I would like you to put them in the chat box and we will work through them one by one. Okay. So I'm going to give you your processing time. Okay, I'm going to give you just a minute, okay, to type in as many questions, to think of and type in as many questions as you have regarding encouraging quieter students to speak. And then once we have a couple of questions, we will start going through them. Okay, so put your thinking caps on. I'm looking forward to your questions. Okay, let's have a look. Okay. Geraldine, you have an excellent point here. I'd like to point out that quiet students can just be shy. They aren't necessarily weak. Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree with that, Geraldine. You know, we can have weak students who are shy, but we can also have incredibly strong students that are shy. Yeah, the two aren't necessarily in correlation with each other. In fact, sometimes I find that, you know, the strongest students, the ones most concerned with accuracy, yeah, can be the most reluctant to speak because they just don't want to make mistakes. You know, they just get too much in their heads. So yeah, totally agree with that. And thank you for pointing it out. That's really important. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay. So, Mary, hello from Canada. Oh, Mary, I bet you're also freezing at the moment. Yeah, it must be super chilly. Probably Ireland is only in the, you know, only in the minor leagues when it comes to Canada level cold. So should students get marked for participation? A shy person could really be affected by this. Yeah, I totally agree, Mary. I guess really it depends on the school you're working for, and you know, if they have a, you know, an assessment rubric or a mark sheet. If they say that students must be marked on participation, I would always consider, you know, pair work and group work as participation, not just whole class work. Okay. So instead of, you know, grading students on how well they participate in front of everybody, you know, also give them credit for how well they do in pair work or group work, you know, when they're talking in a smaller group. And hopefully, you know, that will be a way to avoid their shyness becoming a penalty for them. Okay. So yeah, it's important that we, you know, we don't let them suffer, or we don't let their grades suffer just because they're shy. All right. Thank you, Mary. Good question. All right. So let's have a look at some more. So, okay, Geraldine, let's have a look. I was a top, oh, I'm sorry. Look at my mistakes. I can't even get my words out today. I was a top student, but just couldn't speak in any class. I've met so many adults who won't practice their second language because they don't speak well enough. And continued comment. And that is so sad. Yeah. How do you encourage students to just speak, mistakes and all? Oh yeah, Geraldine, I feel your pain. I was that student too, back in high school. Yeah, I was just so afraid to speak. I was just so afraid of getting things wrong. Okay, so I think there is no easy fix to this issue. You know, this is very much a long-term thing. And I think it's all to do with the teacher creating that atmosphere that is conducive to learning. Okay. Like we said, you know, as the teacher, be accepting of mistakes. Okay. Admit your own mistakes. Okay. If other more outgoing students make mistakes, don't make a big deal of it. Okay. Again, just acknowledge the effort. And maybe you can do some delayed correction, okay, at the end of class, without naming names. Really, you've just got to remain positive. You've got to acknowledge effort, okay, and don't put them on the spot. If you find that your quiet student speaks more in pairs and groups, okay, be happy with that, okay? Don't feel like they have to always speak in front of the entire class if they don't want to, okay? Don't put that pressure on them. As long as they're contributing something in pair work or group work, be happy with that, okay? Speaking in front of the entire class is not the be all and end all. I know, for example, when I was that really shy student in high school, I didn't like speaking in front of the class, but if the teacher ever came to talk to me one-to-one while everybody else was busy, you couldn't stop me, okay? I would speak away in French and I didn't mind because I didn't feel like everybody was listening to me. I would talk to the teacher, happy to speak, because, she didn't pressure me. She knew I was shy. I knew she was doing her best for me. Okay. So yeah, that's it. It's just all about creating that atmosphere, not putting pressure, and hopefully, and speaking from experience, with time, students will gain confidence. Okay. All right. Thank you, Geraldine. Okay. So let's go for more comments. Okay. So Hatis. So hello, Hatis. Oh, what a fabulous name. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. So hi, going back to the part whereby we noted that a shy or nervous student doesn't have the answer to a question, wouldn't it be better for them to try attempt the answer, but at least have tried? I guess you could look at it that way, Hatis. Sure. But at the same time, I would avoid calling them out on it. Okay. Because if, for example, I knew that you, Hatis, were very shy and you didn't like speaking in class. And moreover, I knew that you didn't have the answer to a certain question because I noticed that when I was monitoring. I don't think there would be much to be gained by asking you in front of everybody while knowing that you didn't know the answer. Okay. Because if I said to you, okay, Hatis, what's the answer to this question? Okay. And I stood there for a couple of seconds. I gave you time. You didn't have an answer. And I kept on asking you, well, just try, Hatis, just try. It doesn't matter if you get the wrong answer. Just try. Okay. I guarantee that this would probably make you feel even more uncomfortable because you'd be thinking, oh man, why doesn't she just leave me alone? I've said I don't know. What does she want from me? Okay. So by all means, if it's like part of a pair or group work, then you can certainly step in and encourage them, to speak, while, everybody else is speaking in their pairs and groups too. I think that would be the time to step in and encourage, but not in front of the whole class. I think it could be quite traumatizing. But that said, every student is different. Maybe some students would genuinely benefit from that. So that would be a judgment call for you as the teacher, as you know your individual students. But yeah, it's not a technique that has been hugely successful for me anyway. Okay. But yeah, interesting question, Hatis. It's a fine line. It can be a tough balance for sure. All right. So thank you for your question, Hatis. All right, let's move down then. Let's look at our next one. Oh, Debbie. Hello, Debbie. Great question. How can you encourage a student during a presentation who has brain freeze or who loses their train of thought? Oof. Well, I guess, the same way that you would react to yourself giving a presentation and having brain freeze. This isn't a language problem, I don't think. This is just a presentation problem. I would definitely say, allow your students to have cue cards or allow your students to have notes. Or if they have, if you have the technology available to give a presentation, like with slides and stuff, let them write on some keywords there. Presentations aren't a memory test. Okay. We shouldn't expect our students to, have everything memorized perfectly. Let them use their notes. If you notice that they're just having a bit of a meltdown, just, reassure them, say, okay, don't worry. This happens to us all. Okay, take a moment. If you want, you can look at your notes, and when you're ready, start again. Okay, so, just treat them kindly, give them a moment. If they have completely had a block, okay, and maybe they're getting upset about it, you can tell them, look, don't worry, you can go sit down, gather your thoughts, okay? The next person can go, and then at the end of class, you can come back and finish, okay? So yeah, just be gentle with them, I guess would be my advice. Because yeah, it's happened to us all, I'm sure, that we've had the dreaded brain freeze. Okay, thank you, Debbie. All right. So let's have a look. So hi, Dominic. Dominic, no, it's Kathy, isn't it? I remember you, Kathy, from previous webinars, and I'm sure your real name is Kathy, not Dominic. Tell me if I'm right or wrong in the comment. So let's take a look at your comment. I think that showing understanding would help students to try. For example, my kids constantly correct my German, and so I understand what it's like to make mistakes, but we do improve from them. Yeah, absolutely. That is so true. Again, I would probably prefer in the classroom to do my correcting, in a smaller pair or group setting rather than call them out in front of the class, which I think could do more damage to their confidence. But yeah, we should be aiming to correct at some stage. What I really like to do in speaking tasks, I will, walk around during pair and group work. I'll carry my little notebook and I'll write down any mistakes that I hear. Okay. And then when the speaking task is over, I will write the mistakes up on the board. I'll write the sentences as I heard them on the board. And I'll just say, okay, everyone, as you were speaking, here are some mistakes that I heard. With your partner, I want you to read the sentences on the board, find the mistake, and correct it. Okay. So that can be a really nice way of correcting the mistakes, but without saying, Kathy, you made a mistake. Okay. Or Hattis, you made a mistake. All right. So we're anonymizing the mistakes. Okay. All right. But yeah, thank you, Kathy. That's a great point. All right. So let's take a look at our next one. Okay. Hi, Mena. How are you doing today? Good to see you again. So as a new teacher, I'm terrified of silence in class. I don't wait. That's super common, Mena. How long should I wait until the student answers in one-to-one online class, and what to do if they couldn't answer? So I would say here, Mena, we can normally tell by a student, whether, they're just thinking of an answer or whether they genuinely don't know. Okay. So for example, if you ask a student a question and the student is like, you can almost sense the wheels turning. Okay, they're just processing, they're taking time to think. In that case, just give them time. Okay, I don't want to say wait 5 seconds or wait 10 seconds. Just have the confidence to just wait it out. Okay, maybe don't stare at them intently waiting. Just like you're there, you're being positive, you're being a positive presence. If of course the silence goes on like for a really long time and things are getting awkward, you can absolutely step in. Maybe rephrase the question. Maybe give them a pointer, like, oh, why don't you tell me about the last time you bought something online? Okay. Or, oh, why don't you think about the last birthday party you went to? Okay. You can feed them in some prompts. Okay. But if you ask the question and the student is just like, I don't know, I have no idea. Okay. Then, you can come in a lot more quickly with your rephrased question or with your prompt, etc. Okay. So really, as the teacher, you need to try to read your students. It's like, how much time do I give them? Are they just thinking? Do they need more time to process, or are they just, shutting down on the question? All right. And yeah, if they can't answer, no big deal. Okay, try to prompt them. Give them their time, but if they can't answer, they can't answer. Okay, move on to something else. All right, thank you, Mena. All right. Oh, Hatis, I pronounced your name correctly. Awesome. And Dominic, you are Kathy. Ah, wonderful. Okay. So let's see, Kathy. I meant that we can let them know that we know how they might feel about mistakes. Oh, yeah, I get you. I'm sorry, I misunderstood your comment. Yeah, absolutely. We can fully empathize. Okay. I think most EFL teachers are language learners themselves. Not all EFL teachers, but a lot of us are. And if we are language learners, it can be really nice to tell our students. It's like, believe me, I know this is hard. Okay, you can tell them stories of your own language learning. Yeah, absolutely. Empathy can go a long way. All right, thank you. Okay. Thomas, hello, Thomas. How do you deal with bad behaving students? Well, Thomas, this is a whole other topic. It's not really what we're talking about today. But if you look on YouTube, we have some webinars on classroom management, and there will perhaps be some classroom management webinars coming up in the future. So you will definitely find out a lot there about how to deal with badly behaving students. We don't really have time to get into it here, I'm afraid. Okay, but check out the classroom management webinars and you'll hear lots about that. All right, awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to take one look back through the questions just to make sure I haven't missed anything. But in the meantime, we still have a couple of minutes left. So, if you have any questions related to encouraging students to speak, fire away. We have 5 minutes left. So I'm just going to look back and make sure I haven't missed anything. Okay, let's see. Yeah, that's really interesting, Geraldine, what you say about the participation marks. Yeah, we had that question earlier, didn't we? Yeah, I think it's really important not to let shyness or quietness damage a student's grade, because that's really, really not fair. Okay. Okay. All right. So Mena, let's take a look. Is it better to ask the class who knows the answer to, knowing that 1 or 2 students will participate, or to pick the students that should answer to make everyone participate? Yeah, good question, Mena. Again, I guess this comes down to how well you have monitored your student during a speaking task. Remember we said, like, if you know that a student doesn't have an answer to something, we should avoid asking them. On the contrary, if, for example, a quiet student gave a wonderful answer in their pair or group, it could be a nice confidence building move to say, okay, let's look at this question. Mena, I know you have an amazing answer because I heard you. Okay, I heard you give an amazing answer. Would you like to share with the class? We can do that as a really nice confidence booster. It could be that the student still doesn't want to speak in front of the class, but at least you've given them that little boost. Take any opportunity you can to boost their confidence like that. Other than that, Mena, I guess just try to use a variety of techniques, whether it's calling by name, whether it's leaving it open to everybody, or, as I said before, whether it's a case of like saying, okay, somebody on the left side, somebody on the right side, somebody in the back row. So you're narrowing down the potential answerer, but you're still not picking on anyone. All right. Thank you, Mena. Oh, okay, great. So, Thomas, we have lots of people pointing out that last week's webinar was on classroom management. So if you go along to your TEFL Academy dashboard, you should find that recording, or else you'll find it on YouTube too. Okay. All right, great. Okay, so everyone, that seems to be it for the questions. So hopefully you've picked up some good tips for dealing with our shy students or our quiet students. Just bear in mind that there isn't a quick fix to this problem. Okay, it's all about creating our atmosphere that's conducive to learning, just making the classroom as stress-free as possible, not putting a quiet student under any more pressure than they already put on themselves. And with time, hopefully, we will really foster that, that sense of contribution. All right. So, Mary, you are so welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Geraldine, we are in with a final question for our last minute. Can you recommend any kind of reward system for answering questions when called upon? Honestly, Geraldine, I'm always hesitant to do this. Okay. Even with kids, I would absolutely find a way to praise effort. Okay. But for answering questions when called on, no, because again, it could end up that we're penalizing the kids or the adults or the teenagers who just don't want to answer a question. Okay. I guess it comes back to, taking into account what the students do when talking to you one-on-one, or what they do in a pair, or what they do in a group. Okay. I think it would be problematic to reward them for answering questions, because then naturally the outgoing students will get all of the rewards. Okay. whereas the quieter ones will not. I mean, I guess your praise and your encouragement is their reward, really. That's what we want to instill in them. Okay, awesome. All right. So thank you, Hattis and Mena and Kathy and Geraldine and Thomas for your lovely thank yous. I really appreciate it. And let me say thank you to you all for contributing and giving such fabulous questions. All right. So I think our time is up, unfortunately. It always flies by. So I just have one more request for you. And that would be to go along to our end of webinar survey. Okay. And if you have just a minute, it would be great for you to complete this for us. You can either scan the QR code here, or you can click on the link that I have just put in the chat box.